I thought I had the perfect family, a beautiful wife, a stepson who called me dad, and a baby on the way. Then I came home early and saw my wife with her ex-husband. What I discovered next shattered everything I believed about love, trust, and the child she claimed was mine. My name is David Holland. I'm 42 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I'm an anesthesiologist at Presbyterian Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. Good job, steady hands, the kind of guy who keeps people breathing while surgeons work miracles. Victoria used to say I was her rock, her safe harbor. Turns out rocks are just convenient to stand on while reaching for something else. We met 6 years ago at a medical conference in Atlanta. She was recently divorced, struggling to raise 12-year-old Jaden on her own. I fell hard for her laugh, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, how fiercely she protected her son. Jaden took to me immediately, called me Doc Dave, and asked endless questions about anesthesia. Within 2 years, we were married at Magnolia Gardens. I thought we were building something solid. Victoria worked as a nurse practitioner at a pediatric clinic. We bought a 4-bedroom colonial in Myers Park, complete with a pool for Jaden. Sunday morning pancakes became our tradition. I taught Jaden to throw a curveball. Victoria and I would sit on the porch swing after he went to bed, planning vacations and talking about having our own baby. Then last spring, something shifted. Victoria started working late more often. She joined a book club that met every Thursday night, started going to yoga classes that seemed to run longer each week. When I'd ask about her day, her answers got shorter, more distracted. She'd scroll through her phone during dinner, smiling at messages she never shared. The pregnancy announcement came in July, right before the 4th of July barbecue. Victoria pulled me aside that morning, tears in her eyes, holding a positive test. I swept her up and spun her around our kitchen, my heart pounding with joy. After 3 years of trying, we were finally going to have our own child. Jaden was thrilled to become a big brother. But even as we picked out cribs, something felt off. Victoria seemed distant during doctor appointments, almost reluctant when I wanted to come along. She insisted on keeping the pregnancy quiet, wouldn't even let me tell my parents. When I'd reach for her hand during ultrasounds, she'd pull away, saying she was hot or uncomfortable. 3 weeks ago, everything fell apart. I came home early from a canceled surgery to find Victoria packing a suitcase. Her face was pale, hands shaking as she folded clothes. When I asked where she was going, she said her ex-husband Richard was in town. About Jaden, she claimed. About custody arrangements. Richard Stone, the man who'd walked out on Victoria and 6-year-old Jaden 5 years earlier. The guy who sent sporadic child support checks and called maybe twice a year. I'd never met him face to face, but I'd seen the damage he'd left behind. That night, Victoria didn't come home until after midnight. She slipped into bed without waking me, or so she thought. I lay there listening to her breathe, wondering why she smelled like expensive cologne instead of her usual lavender body wash. Tuesday evening started like any other. I was reviewing patient charts in my home office when Jaden knocked on the door. The kid looked troubled, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he did when he had something important to say. "Doc Dave, can we talk?" he asked, closing the door behind him. I set down my papers and gave him my full attention. "What's on your mind, buddy?" Jaden sat down in the chair across from my desk, fidgeting with his phone. "It's about Mom and my dad." My chest tightened. "What about them?" "Yesterday, when you were at work, Dad came by the house," Jaden said quietly. "Mom told me to stay in my room, but I heard them talking. Actually, more like arguing." I leaned forward. "Arguing about what?" "Dad was saying something about the baby, about how Mom needed to tell you the truth. And Mom kept saying it wasn't the right time." Jaden's voice got smaller. "Doc Dave, what truth? What's going on?" Before I could answer, we heard Victoria's car in the driveway. Jaden's eyes went wide with panic. "Please don't tell her I said anything," he whispered. "She made me promise not to talk about Dad's visits." "Visits? Plural." My blood ran cold. "How many times has he been here, Jaden?" "3 times this week. Maybe more when I was at school." He stood up quickly as we heard the front door open. "I have to go." "But Doc Dave, I'm scared. Something's really wrong." Victoria called out from downstairs, her voice artificially cheerful. "David? Jaden? I'm home." I watched Jaden hurry out of my office, my mind racing. Richard had been coming to our house regularly. Victoria had been lying about it. And there was some truth about the baby that she wasn't telling me. I walked downstairs to find Victoria in the kitchen, unpacking takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant. She looked up with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, kissing my cheek. The same expensive cologne smell hit me again. "Fine," I said, studying her face. "How was yours?" "Oh, the usual chaos of the clinic. Mrs. Patterson's son had another asthma attack, and we had 2 sick calls, so I was running around all day." She pulled containers from the bag with practiced efficiency. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together. Just the 3 of us." Lies came so easily to her now. Smooth, detailed, believable lies. "Victoria," I said carefully, "we need to talk." She froze for just a second, her hand halfway to the cabinet. "About what?" "About Richard. About why he's been coming to our house." The container of pad thai slipped from her fingers and hit the counter. Sauce splattered across the granite surface like blood drops. For the first time in weeks, Victoria's mask slipped completely. "I can explain," she said, but her voice had lost all its confidence. "Then explain." I stepped closer, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Fear. Not of me, but of being caught. "And this time, tell me the truth." Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for a paper towel to clean the spilled sauce. When she looked up at me, I saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. "David, please, just give me time to figure out how to say this." "How long does it take to tell the truth, Victoria?" That's when I knew. Whatever she was about to tell me would change everything. Victoria stood there for what felt like an eternity, the paper towel forgotten in her hands. The spilled pad thai sauce had started to congeal on the counter. "Richard and I have been talking more frequently," she finally said. "About Jaden's future. College planning. College planning requires him to come to our house 3 times this week." I kept my voice steady. "Victoria, Jaden told me everything. So let's skip the rehearsed explanations." Her face went white. "You talked to Jaden?" "David, he's just a kid. He doesn't understand adult situations. He understands enough to know when his mother is lying." I crossed my arms. "He's scared, Victoria. Whatever game you're playing with Richard, it's affecting your son." Victoria straightened her shoulders. "Fine. Yes, Richard has been coming by. He wants to be more involved in Jaden's life now. After 5 years of barely calling. What changed? He's doing well financially. He wants to help with Jaden's expenses, maybe take him for longer visits. And you couldn't discuss this with me because you get jealous whenever Richard's name comes up." The words exploded out of her. "You act like you're Jaden's real father, but you're not, David. Richard is." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "You're right. I'm not Jaden's biological father, but I've been the one raising him while Richard was playing businessman in Miami." Before Victoria could answer, Jaden appeared in the kitchen doorway. His face was pale. "Mom," he said quietly, "are you and Dad getting back together?" Victoria's mask slipped completely. "Jaden, sweetie, it's complicated." "No, it's not," Jaden said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Either you love Doc Dave, or you don't. Either we're a family, or we're not." I knelt down to his level. "Jaden, whatever happens between your mom and me, nothing will change how I feel about you. You're my son in every way that matters." Jaden threw his arms around my neck. "I don't want Dad to come back. I want things to stay the way they are." Over his shoulder, I saw Victoria's face contort with guilt and anger. After Jaden went upstairs, Victoria turned to me with desperation in her eyes. "David, Richard is offering things I can't give Jaden. Private school, college tuition opportunities." "What's he offering you, Victoria?" Victoria's question hung in the air like smoke. What was Richard offering her? "Security," she said finally. "He's changed, David. He's successful now, stable. He wants to provide for Jaden properly. And the baby?" I gestured toward her stomach. "Where does our child fit into Richard's grand plan?" Something flickered across her face. Panic, maybe guilt. "The baby will always be your priority, of course. Always be my priority, not our priority. Mine alone." "Victoria, are you planning to leave me?" She started to shake her head, then stopped. "I don't know anymore. Richard says he can give us a better life. He's bought a house in Raleigh, near the good schools. What about what Jaden wants? You heard him. He doesn't want Richard back in his life full time. Jaden's 12 years old. He doesn't understand what's best for his future. Richard can pay for Duke or UNC, can set him up for success. The words hit their target. Every insecurity I'd ever had about not being wealthy enough, about working too much, came flooding back. But then I thought about Jaden's face when I taught him to throw that curveball. How he'd started signing his school papers, Jaden Holland, even though it wasn't legally his name yet. You know what I can offer him? I said, my voice deadly calm. A father who shows up. A father who doesn't abandon him for 5 years, and then waltz back in when it's convenient. Victoria flinched. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Victoria. But you made it unfair when you decided to negotiate our family's future behind my back. I walked to the kitchen window and stared out of the backyard where Jaden's basketball hoop stood. There's something else, isn't there? I turned back to face her. This isn't just about money. What aren't you telling me? Victoria's hands moved unconsciously to her stomach. David, please. Can't we just take this one step at a time? No. I'm done with taking things one step at a time while you orchestrate my life falling apart. I stepped closer. What is Richard really offering you, Victoria? She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Instead of answering, she whispered, I think I should stay at my sister's tonight. Give us both some space to think. Running away to think, or running away to meet Richard. David, don't. I nodded slowly. Pack your bag. But understand this. When you walk out that door tonight, you're making a choice. And choices have consequences. After she left, I went upstairs to check on Jaden. He was sitting on his bed, pretending to do homework. Where's Mom? He asked. She's going to stay at Aunt Sarah's tonight. Jaden nodded like he'd expected this. Doc Dave, are you going to fight for us? What do you mean? Are you going to let Dad take us away? Or are you going to fight? I looked at this kid who became my son in every way except biology. Jaden, I'm going to fight for you harder than anyone has ever fought for anything. That a guarantee. The next morning, Victoria's absence felt like a wound in the house. I made breakfast for Jaden and myself, but neither of us had much appetite. Doc Dave, Jaden said finally, when Mom and Dad were married before, were they happy? The question caught me off guard. What do you remember about that time? Not much. I was little, but I remember lots of yelling. And Dad leaving for work trips that lasted weeks. He looked up at me. Were you and Mom happy? Before all this started, I thought we were. But maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. Or maybe Mom's just good at pretending. After dropping Jaden at school, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. Instead of going to the hospital, I drove to Richard's hotel. If I was going to fight for my family, I needed to understand what I was fighting against. The hotel lobby was all marble and crystal. I approached the front desk with confidence. I'm Dr. Holland, I told the clerk. I need to leave a message for Richard Stone. Medical emergency involving his son. Of course, doctor. Mr. Stone is in the presidential suite. Should I call up? I'll go up myself. Time-sensitive situation. Richard answered the door wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. His smile faltered when he realized I wasn't hotel staff. You must be David, he said, extending his hand. I've heard so much about you. I didn't take his hand. We need to talk. Richard stepped aside, gesturing me into a suite larger than most apartments. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Charlotte skyline. Impressive setup for a business trip, I said. Actually, it's not temporary. Richard poured himself a scotch, despite it being 9 a.m. I'm relocating my operations to Charlotte. Permanently. The news hit me like a sledgehammer. Since when? I've been planning this move for months. Victoria knew about it. He studied my reaction. She didn't tell you. Months. Victoria had known for months that Richard was moving back. Why Charlotte? I asked. Better business opportunities. And my family is here. Richard's smile was calculated. David, I don't see you as an enemy. You've done a wonderful job with Jaden. But things are changing now. Such as private education, travel, connections. The kind of advantages that open doors. He fixed me with a steady stare. I'm also in a position to provide for Victoria in ways that a hospital employee never could. The insult was delivered smoothly. Is that what this is about? Money. It's about what's best for my family. Your family? You abandoned them 5 years ago. I made mistakes. I'm here to correct them. Richard moved closer. David, I respect what you've done for my wife and son, but they were mine first, and they'll be mine again. The casual confidence made my blood boil. Does Victoria know you're talking to me? Victoria knows exactly where things stand. Did she not explain the situation when she came to see me last night? Last night, while I was tucking Jaden in a bed, Victoria had been with Richard. I think we understand each other, Richard continued. You're a decent man, David. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stood up, hands clenched. You're right about one thing, Richard. I'm a decent man, and decent men don't give up without a fight. Richard's smile never wavered as I headed for the door. David, he called after me. Just remember, this isn't really about you and me. It's about what's best for Jaden. And for the baby. I stopped cold. What about the baby? Victoria hasn't told you? Perhaps you should ask her about the timeline. The implication hit me like a freight train. I left the hotel in a daze, my mind racing through dates and possibilities I didn't want to consider. Instead of going to work, I drove home and called in sick. I needed time to think, to process what Richard had just implied. I sat in my office, staring at the calendar. Victoria had announced the pregnancy in July. If she was 8 weeks along then, that would put conception in mid-May. But what if she'd been further along? My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. We need to talk. Can you meet me for lunch? I stared at the message before responding. No. If you want to talk, come home. To your family. Her reply came immediately. David, please don't make this harder than it has to be. The exact words Richard had used. Around noon, Jaden's school called. He got into a fight and needed to be picked up. When I arrived, I found him with a split lip and defiant eyes. What happened? I asked as we walked to the car. Tommy Williams said his dad heard that my parents are getting divorced and that my real dad is taking me away. Jaden kicked at a pebble. I told him he was a liar. Jaden, you can't solve problems by fighting. Why not? You're fighting for us, aren't you? I stopped and knelt down to face him. That's different. Adults have other ways to handle conflicts. Like what? Because it seems like the adults in my life are doing a pretty bad job. His voice broke slightly. Doc Dave, are you going to lose? The question hung in the air. This 12-year-old was asking me to guarantee something I wasn't sure I could deliver. I don't know, buddy, but I'm going to try everything I can. What if trying isn't enough? I looked at this boy who'd been through too much already. Then we'll figure out our next move together. But Jaden, I need you to promise me something. What? No matter what happens with your mom and Richard, you always have a choice about who you want in your life. You're old enough to have a voice in custody decisions. Jaden nodded solemnly. Doc Dave, I already know who I choose. That afternoon, I made another decision the old David would never have made. I called a private investigator. Tom Bradley came recommended by my lawyer friend. When he arrived that evening, he looked exactly like Central Casting would order for a private eye. Dr. Holland, your wife's rekindling things with her ex-husband, and you suspect the pregnancy timeline might not be what it seems. That's about the size of it. Tom nodded. In cases like this, the truth usually comes out in the details. Phone records, credit card statements, hotel receipts. How long will this take? Depends on how deep the deception goes. Could be days, could be weeks. Tom leaned forward. Are you prepared for what we might find? I thought about Jaden's split lip, Richard's confident smile, Victoria's tears that might have been guilt. I'm prepared for the truth, whatever it is. 3 days later, Tom Bradley called with news that would change everything. I was in the middle of surgery when my phone buzzed with his message. We need to meet. Tonight. I have everything you need. After finishing in the OR, I drove to the small diner where Tom had asked to meet. He was already there, nursing black coffee and looking like a man who'd seen too much. Dr. Holland, he said as I sat down, I've been doing this for 20 years, and this case is something else. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. Your wife and Richard Stone have been planning this reunion for 6 months. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even jewelry purchases. This wasn't some spontaneous rekindling. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Credit card statements, photos, phone records. The evidence was overwhelming. There's more, Tom continued. Richard's been involved in some questionable real estate deals, the kind that attract federal attention. He needs to clean up his image, fast. What better way than reuniting with his abandoned family? I studied a photo of Victoria and Richard entering a hotel together. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 weeks before she announced her pregnancy to me. Tom, based on everything you found, what are the chances that baby is mine? Tom leaned back and sighed. Based on the timeline, the frequency of their meetings? Doc, I'd say the chances are slim to none. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I've been preparing myself for this possibility. There's something else. Victoria's been moving money, small amounts but consistent, into an account Richard has access to. How much money? About $15,000 over the past 3 months. Your money from your joint savings. I closed the envelope and looked out the window. Across the street, families were enjoying dinner together, oblivious to the fact that someone's world was falling apart 20 feet away. What's your recommendation? I asked. Confront them. Both of them. Together. With Jaden present. Why Jaden? Because kids are truth detectors. And because he deserves to see his mother's reaction when she's caught in her lies. The next evening, I called Victoria and told her we needed to have a family meeting. All of us, including Richard. She tried to protest, but I made it clear this wasn't a request. They arrived together, which told me everything I needed to know about where Victoria's loyalties lay. Richard walked into my house like he owned it, his hand possessively on Victoria's lower back. Jaden sat next to me on the couch, his jaw set with determination. Victoria, I said calmly, I think it's time we all heard the truth. She looked nervously between Richard and me. David, what are you talking about? I pulled out the manila envelope and set it on the coffee table. I'm talking about 6 months of planning. Hotel receipts, jewelry purchases, $15,000 of my money that you've been funneling to Richard. Victoria's face went white. Richard, however, smiled. David, Richard said smoothly, I think you're overreacting to a complicated situation. Am I? I stood up, feeling completely in control for the first time since this nightmare began. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you two have been running a con game on me and my son. Your son. Richard's mask slipped slightly. Jaden is my son. That's when Jaden spoke up, his voice clear and strong. No, I'm not. Doc Dave is my dad. You're just the guy who provided DNA. Richard's face darkened at Jaden's words. Son, you don't understand the situation. Don't call me son, Jaden said firmly. And I understand perfectly. You abandoned us. Doc Dave took care of us, and now you want to pretend like nothing happened. Victoria reached for Jaden. Sweetie, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm not making anything harm, Mom. You are. Jaden looked at his mother with disappointment that broke my heart. I don't want you to take me away from my real dad. Richard stood up, his composure finally slipping. This is ridiculous. David, you've turned my son against me. I didn't have to turn him against anything, I replied calmly. Children recognize the people who actually love them. That's when Richard made his fatal mistake. He reached for Jaden's arm, trying to pull him closer. Jaden, you're coming with me. This discussion is over. But Jaden jerked away and moved behind me. Don't touch me. Something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, putting myself directly between Richard and Jaden. You put your hands on my son like I wasn't even there, I said, my voice deadly quiet. So let me remind you exactly who I am. Richard tried to stare me down, but I could see uncertainty creeping into his eyes. I'm the man who held Jaden when he had nightmares about you leaving. I'm the man who taught him to ride a bike and throw a curveball. I'm the man who's been there for every moment you missed. I took another step closer, and I'm the man who's going to make sure you never hurt this family again. David, you're being emotional, Victoria said weakly. No, Victoria. I'm being a father. I pulled out my phone and showed them a text message. The paternity test results came in an hour ago. Victoria's face went ashen. David, please. The baby isn't mine, is it, Victoria? She started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of someone whose lies had finally collapsed. How long have you known? I asked. Since the beginning, she whispered. The admission hung in the air like poison. Jaden looked at his mother with complete disgust. So you lied to Doc Dave about the baby too? He asked. Victoria couldn't look at him. Jaden, it's complicated. No, it's not. Jaden exploded. You cheated on the best man we've ever known. You lied about having his baby, and you stole his money. Richard tried to regain control. Jaden, your mother and I are trying to rebuild our family. We're not a family. Jaden shouted. Doc Dave and I are a family. You and Mom can do whatever you want, but I'm staying here. I looked at Victoria, who was still crying, and Richard, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Victoria, you have a choice to make right now, I said. You can walk out that door with Richard and chase whatever fantasy you think you're building. But if you do, You're walking away from the son who needed you to be a mother. David, please don't make me choose. I'm not making you choose. You already chose. I'm just making the consequences clear. Victoria looked at Jaden one more time, then at Richard. When she stood up and moved toward Richard, Jaden's face went completely blank. Mom, he said quietly, if you leave with him, don't come back. Victoria hesitated for just a moment. Then she picked up her purse and walked toward the door with Richard. As they reached the threshold, I called out one last time. Victoria, the money you stole? My lawyer will be in touch about that. After they left, Jaden and I sat in silence for a long time. Doc Dave, he said finally. Yeah, buddy. Are we going to be okay? I put my arm around him and pulled him close. We're going to be better than okay. 2 months later, I sat in a Charlotte courtroom watching Richard's expensive lawyer try to salvage an impossible case. Victoria sat next to him, looking like a shadow of the woman I'd married. The stolen money, the fabricated pregnancy timeline, and Jaden's own testimony had demolished any chance Richard had of gaining custody. Your Honor, Richard's attorney said desperately, my client has a biological right to his son. Judge Harrison, a stern woman in her 60s, looked unimpressed. Biological connection doesn't automatically grant custody rights, especially when those rights were abandoned for 5 years. Jaden had been incredible on the witness stand. At 12 years old, he'd spoken with a maturity that impressed everyone in the courtroom. When asked about his preference, his answer was clear and unwavering. I want to live with my dad. My real dad. Dr. Holland. The judge had also been shown the evidence Tom Bradley had gathered. The systematic deception, the financial fraud, the calculated manipulation of a child's emotions. It painted a picture of two adults willing to use a boy as a pawn in their game. Mr. Stone, Judge Harrison said, you abandoned your parental responsibilities for 5 years. You cannot simply reclaim them when convenient. This court finds that the best interests of the child are served by maintaining his current living arrangement with Dr. Holland. Richard's face turned red. Your Honor, this is outrageous. He's my biological son. Mr. Stone, one more outburst, and you'll be held in contempt. The judge's voice was ice cold. Dr. Holland has been this child's de facto father for 4 years. He has provided stability, support, and love. You provided genetic material. This court sees a clear distinction. The final ruling was everything I'd hoped for. Full custody to me, with Richard granted supervised visitation every other weekend, pending his completion of anger management classes. Victoria was granted similar visitation rights, contingent on her cooperation with the custody arrangement. As we left the courthouse, Jaden walked beside me with his head held high. Doc Dave, he said, can I legally change my name to Holland now? If that's what you want, absolutely. It's what I've wanted since I was 8 years old. Victoria caught up with us in the parking lot. Her pregnancy was showing now, and she looked exhausted. David, she said quietly, I need to tell you something. I stopped walking, but didn't turn around. What is it, Victoria? I'm sorry. For everything. I made terrible choices, and I hurt the two people I loved most. Jaden looked at his mother with eyes that held no anger, only sadness. Mom, sorry doesn't fix what you broke. I know, but I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Then you had a funny way of showing it, Jaden replied. Victoria started crying again. Can you ever forgive me? Jaden thought about it for a moment. Maybe someday, but I'll never forget, and I'll never trust you the way I did before. It was a mature response from a kid who'd been forced to grow up too fast. As Victoria walked away toward Richard's BMW, Jaden looked up at me. Are you glad it's over? I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad we know the truth. And I'm glad we're together. Me too, Dad. It was the first time he called me Dad in public, and it meant everything. 6 months after the custody hearing, Jaden and I had settled into our new life together. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a dark cloud had finally lifted. We'd redecorated Victoria's old office into a proper teenager's room for Jaden, complete with posters of his favorite basketball players and a desk for homework. The adoption papers had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. Jaden Holland was now his legal name, and I was officially his father in every sense of the word. The ceremony at the courthouse had been small, just us, my parents, and my brother's family. But when the judge signed those papers, I felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. Dad, Jaden said one evening as we cleaned up after dinner, do you ever miss Mom? It was a question he'd been working up the courage to ask for months. I dried my hands on a dish towel and considered my answer carefully. I miss the woman I thought she was, I said honestly. I miss the family I thought we were building together. But I don't miss the lies or the uncertainty. Do you think she's happy with Richard? I hope she is. Your mom deserves to be happy, even if she made some terrible choices getting there. Victoria had given birth to a daughter 2 months earlier. Richard had sent a birth announcement. Whether out of courtesy or spite, I wasn't sure. The baby's name was Charlotte, and according to the photo, she looked just like Victoria had when she was young. Will I ever have to see the baby? Jaden asked. Only if you want to. She's your half-sister, but you get to decide what that relationship looks like. Jaden nodded thoughtfully. Maybe when I'm older. Right now, I just want things to stay the way they are. Things had indeed settled into a good rhythm. I cut back my hours at the hospital slightly to be more available for Jaden's activities. We went to every basketball game, every school event, every parent-teacher conference together. I was learning that being a single father was challenging, but incredibly rewarding. Dad, Jaden said as we sat on the porch swing that evening, I want to tell you something. What's that? When all this started, when Mom first brought up Dad coming back, I was scared that you'd give up on us. That you'd decide it was too much trouble to fight for someone who wasn't really your son. His words hit me harder than I'd expected. Jaden, you were never not my son. Biology doesn't make a father. Being there does. I know that now. But I was just a kid, and kids worry about stuff like that. I put my arm around him. Well, you never have to worry about that again. You're stuck with me for life, whether you like it or not. Jaden grinned. I can live with that. As we sat there watching the sunset, I thought about how dramatically our lives had changed in less than a year. Victoria's betrayal had nearly destroyed us, but in the end, it had shown us what really mattered. We'd been tested by fire and emerged stronger. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom Bradley. Saw the adoption announcement in the paper. Congratulations, document. You two deserve all the happiness in the world. I showed the message to Jaden, who smiled. He's right, you know. We do deserve to be happy. Yes, we do. Later that night, as I tucked Jaden into bed, a ritual we'd never stopped, even now that he was 13. He looked up at me with serious eyes. Dad, thank you for fighting for me. Jaden, I didn't fight for you. I fought with you. We're a team, remember. The best team ever. As I turned off his light and closed the door, I felt a peace I'd never known before. We'd been through hell and back, but we'd emerged as something stronger than we'd ever been apart. We were family, real family, and nothing would ever change that again. The future stretched out ahead of us, full of possibilities and promise. And for the first time in over a year, I was excited to see what came next.